The next steps. The head of the Centers for Disease Control gives lawmakers an update on the fight against COVID-19. We're on Capitol Hill, fighting the flames. New developments in the wildfires engulfing several regions in the western United States. Moment of silence. Pope Francis holds his weekly talk with the faithful, and it takes a somber tone. And setting sail. A report from England on the 400th anniversary of the launch of the Mayflower. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, September 16th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Donald Trump's chief of staff defends the president's optimism for a coronavirus vaccine to arrive soon, while Democratic rival Joe Biden launches an attack ad that accuses the president of lying about the pandemic. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, here at the White House, President Donald Trump has been tweeting about vaccines and college football and his optimism for both in the face of a blistering attack by his Democratic opponent.
With close to 30 million people infected globally by the coronavirus and more than 196,000 people in the U.S. dead, President Donald Trump has been very optimistic about getting a vaccine soon. Tweeting out today, vaccines are moving along fast and safely. His chief of staff, Mark Meadows, spoke to reporters outside the West Wing about the prospects of a vaccine arriving in the very near future.
We have a real hope of getting something that actually works.
And whether it happens in 2 weeks or 2 months, he says,
I can tell you there's one person that sits in an Oval Office that daily is asking me how much progress have we made, where are we going, and probably is one of the most informed when it comes to where we are in the trials.
Meanwhile, an attack ad approved by Joe Biden essentially calls President Trump a liar regarding the coronavirus pandemic.
The president caught red-handed lying about coronavirus, publicly saying
children are almost immune,
secretly saying the truth.
This is deadly stuff. It's not just old, plenty of young people.
Look at the fact that we have one of the lowest case fatalities in the world. Look at the fact that from scratch, we developed the largest and most advanced testing system in the entire world.
If President Trump was looking to shore up votes in places like Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin, he certainly scored a touchdown today, with the Big Ten deciding to start playing in October. The president tweeting, "Great news, Big Ten football is back, all teams to participate. Thank you to the players, coaches, parents, and all school representatives. Have a fantastic season. It is my great honor to have helped."
Also, when Kayleigh McEnany walked up to the lectern today, the very first thing she talked about was Big Ten football getting back in action and how happy the president is to see that. She listed off all the states impacted by that Big Ten decision, and some of those states are key battleground states come this November. Tracy?
Okay, and a lot of people excited for that, too. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Well, the Biden campaign is naming a panel of co-chairs for its outreach effort, and several of them have promoted abortion. The co-chairs reportedly include California Attorney General Javier Becerra, who has a perfect rating from Planned Parenthood, and Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, who says he is opposed to abortion but supports legal protection for abortion and does not want to overturn Roe versus Wade. We're halfway through House lawmakers' first week back to work, and they are no closer to unveiling a deal on another COVID-19 relief bill. Yet the pandemic still remains the big issue for both parties. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, Tracy, as we know, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is still the Democratic point person with regards to all COVID-19 relief negotiations, and she's holding firm on a big, massive relief bill. But I did speak to one House Republican who tells me that there is some good news as officials continue to gain control and a handle on the virus.
We have the ability to get over this COVID thing. We're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Medications are working. Vaccines are close at hand.
With House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at the center of bipartisan negotiations for more COVID-19 relief, Congressman Jody Hice tells me a new bill is unlikely to come soon.
Nancy Pelosi wants $3 trillion, and she's not going to budge on that.
While House lawmakers debate the next steps for yet another possible coronavirus relief bill, today on Capitol Hill, the CDC director was in the Senate testifying before a committee hearing on what the government has done to protect Americans from COVID-19.
In many ways, this has been like trying to build the plane while we were flying the plane.
Senators questioned the CDC director and other health officials about vaccine production to protect Americans from catching COVID-19.
How are you balancing out to be able to make sure that there will be an ethical alternative for individuals that don't want to take a vaccine that's also produced using the tissue of an aborted child?
My recollection is we're going to have a number of candidates that's not going to compromise one's ethics related to the use of human tissue.
A vaccine could be manufactured in as little as 3 weeks from now.
Now, is it approved by the FDA? That is a decision that they will have to do based on the scientific data that they receive from the clinical trials.
The CDC director says the best defense for all Americans is continue to wear their mask when they go outside. They also said and testified on Capitol Hill that in some ways it could be even better than the vaccine. Tracy?
Eric, did the Senate hearing discuss how to protect us from the next pandemic?
Yeah, they certainly did. You know, one of the issues that they talked about is increasing domestic production of medication. As we know, 80 to 85% of our drugs are manufactured in countries such as China. So they're talking about bringing that manufacturing back here to the United States so we're not so dependent on other countries. And they hope to address that in the months ahead. So we have to wait and see.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Thank you again. China's state-owned pharmaceutical company Sinopharm says hundreds of thousands are getting a vaccine for COVID-19 under an emergency use program. The company says it gave the emergency vaccinations to high-risk groups such as hospital workers. Sinopharm says it is developing 2 vaccines, which are both now in phase 3 clinical trials. India is now dealing with the fastest rate of infections in the world. It has now topped 5 million confirmed cases. More than 82,000 have died from COVID-19 there. India had only recorded 1 million cases in the first 6 months of the pandemic. Officials in Hong Kong want the United States to reverse its decision to label products produced in Hong Kong as made in China and are threatening to refer the dispute to the World Trade Organization.
There is a case for us to take U.S. Into a consultation and, if necessary, WTO processes.
The World Trade Organization considers Hong Kong as a separate entity from China. But last month, in response to China's new national security law, the U.S. required all goods produced in the former British territory to carry the label Made in China. Japan's new prime minister gets introduced to the Japanese emperor. Yoshida Suga was elected as Japan's new prime minister early this morning and today met with Emperor Naruhito at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. He says his top priorities are fighting the coronavirus pandemic and turning Japan's economy around. The head of the European Commission is calling out Russia, saying the poisoning of Alexei Navalny is not the first attempt to silence a critic of President Vladimir Putin.
The poisoning of Alexei Navalny with an advanced chemical agent is not a one-off. We have seen the pattern in Georgia, and in Ukraine, in Syria and Salisbury, and in election meddling around the world.
Von der Leyen also says a Russian gas pipeline being built will not improve Russia's attitude. Navalny is recovering in a German hospital and says he still wants to return to Russia. Today, Pope Francis appointed a new head of the Synod of Bishops. Bishop Mario Grech is the former bishop of Gozo in Malta. He served as second secretary to last year's synod on the Amazon, alongside the former head, Cardinal Lorenzo Baldessari. A synod is a meeting of bishops to speak about a particular doctrine in the church. The next synod is scheduled for October 2022. Pope Francis held his weekly talk with pilgrims at the Vatican, and he honored an Italian priest who was murdered yesterday.
Testimone della carità verso I più poveri.
The Holy Father asked the faithful to pray for Father Roberto Malgacini, who was stabbed to death in Como, Italy. The priest was focused on helping homeless people. Pope Francis praised the 51-year-old's witness of charity toward the poorest among us. Hannah Brockhouse, senior Rome correspondent for Catholic News Agency, joins us now. Hannah, welcome back. So can you tell us a little bit more about what happened to the Italian priest and what the Pope said about him?
Well, Tracy, Father Roberto Malgacini was a priest of the Diocese of Como, and he was well known for his care for the poor, for the homeless, and for immigrants in his community. He was, yesterday, September 15th, leaving his parish in the morning to go serve breakfast to the homeless when he was stabbed by an immigrant that was known to him, someone he had helped, a 53-year-old man from Tunisia, who is known to have some mental issues, and this man later turned himself into police for the stabbing. Obviously, the community of Como has been mourning his loss, and Pope Francis joined them in mourning the loss of this priest at his general audience address. He asked people to pray for the priest, but also to pray for all religious and priests and lay people who serve the needy and those rejected by society.
Hannah, what else did the Holy Father have to say at his weekly talk today?
He is continuing in his catechesis his theme of healing the world after the coronavirus. So he reflected principally this week on the contemplation of nature and creation, which he said is very important for learning how to also see the beauty in our fellow human beings. So he encouraged people not to exploit creation, obviously, because he said often people who exploit creation also are led to exploit and use their fellow man. That was the crux of his message today.
Hannah, do we know what's coming up on the Pope's agenda?
Well, one important thing that's coming up soon is October 3rd, Pope Francis will be traveling to Assisi, Italy, where he will be signing the third encyclical of his pontificate called Fratelli Tutti, which means all brothers in Italian. However, it will be retaining the Italian title in all languages, so it'll be known as Fratelli Tutti. And we found out today that the release of the encyclical will take place on October 4th. Which is the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. The theme of this encyclical deals mainly with human fraternity and with social relationships. Other than this, we don't have a lot of information, but it's a highly anticipated document, obviously, and it continues that Franciscan theme that we saw with Pope Francis and his second encyclical, Laudato Si.
Hannah, I want to quickly turn to the pandemic. Has the Vatican returned back to normal activities yet?
Things are not completely normal, but we are seeing a slight return, I would say. The Pope is beginning to meet with groups of people that had been on hold for quite some time. He's also resumed having pilgrims at his Wednesday audiences. They aren't in St. Peter's Square, but they're in an interior piazza of the Vatican. So we are seeing little pieces of this return to normal, if you want to call it that. Unfortunately, other things such as international trips of the Pope, we don't know when those will return, but little by little we are seeing some normality again.
Well, Hannah, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Hannah Brockhouse, senior Rome correspondent for Catholic News Agency. Thanks again, Hannah.
Thanks, Tracy.
Coming up, an update on the destructive wildfires on the west coast of the United States. Wildfires have burned millions of acres across California, Oregon, and Washington. California has reported 25 fatalities since August 15th, and firefighters from at least 9 states are all trying to extinguish the flames. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the studio. Mark?
Tracy, this firefight is ongoing, and now help has even arrived from other countries. Canada and Israel have sent fire crews to assist. Yesterday, Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris joined California's governor to survey the damage.
This is not a partisan issue. This is not, this ideology should not kick in. It's just a fact. This is just a fact. And we have to do better as a country.
The flames have spread further north into Oregon. State officials say there are 8 confirmed fatalities there, and even more people are missing. One resident says she is lucky her home wasn't destroyed.
The flames actually came up to the house on this side of the home and on the back, and how it didn't catch on fire is just amazing to us. Never in a million years you'd think something like this would happen.
Smoke from the wildfires has even reached the East Coast. These images from a NASA satellite show clouds of smoke stretching across the country. The wildfires have led to hazardous air quality along parts of the West Coast. And Bishop Peter Smith in the Archdiocese of Portland says that Catholics in Oregon and California could be impacted with loss of homes, property, and possibly even loved ones because of these fires. He says that church-based charities are standing by, ready to assist with immediate needs and long-term recovery efforts. Tracy.
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. Thank you so much, Mark. The National Hurricane Center is warning of, quote, historical flooding on the Gulf Coast of the United States from Hurricane Sally. The storm made landfall in Gulf Shores, Alabama early this morning as a powerful Category 2 hurricane with winds of 100 miles an hour. That said, it is moving very slowly and torrential rains are forecast to last for hours. Nearly 500,000 people are without power and tornado warnings are in effect. There was already flooding in Pensacola, Florida, and statistically, flooding kills more people than all other weather disasters. Tonight, we take a closer look at religious freedom protections for members of the military. Just 1 week ago, the U.S. Navy reversed its decision to cancel contracts with priests as a cost-saving measure. This after an outcry from religious and political leaders, including President Trump. Joining me now on Skype to talk more about this is Mike Berry, General Counsel for First Liberty Institute. Mike, welcome to the show. Glad you're on. I know you were one of those people to speak out, writing to Defense Secretary Mark Esper and urging him to take action to stop religious discrimination against Catholic service members. Let's talk a little bit more about that and why you felt it was so important.
Well, first of all, we need to start with the fact that our service members rely on faith as a force multiplier. If we're going to remain the strongest and most powerful military on earth, and if we're going to remain one of the freest nations on earth, we have to ensure that those who defend our freedoms don't lose theirs. And when the Navy issued this new cost-saving measure, which would have canceled the contracts for Catholic priests who were filling a need because there's a shortfall, a shortage of Catholic chaplains serving in the military, the amount of money that would have been saved was a fraction of a % of the Navy's budget. And more to the point, the religious freedom of our service members should never be for sale. I don't know if we can put a dollar amount on our constitutional freedoms in this country.
I know the Department of Defense issued new guidance this month to protect religious freedom for service members. What do you think of that move, and what are some of the enhancements or improvements to the military's policies?
Well, in light of what just happened with the Navy, the issue that we just talked about, I think this is a breath of fresh air. I mean, we kind of had some bad news. Well, it was followed by good news when the Navy reversed its decision. But then when we got news that the Department of Defense was issuing revised guidance, we took a look at that guidance because this is something that First Liberty Institute has been asking for the better part of 6 years. And the previous guidance was way out of step with the Constitution and out of step with federal law. And when we saw the new DoD regulation clarifying that the Department of Defense will now follow the Constitution and will apply the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to our military, I got to tell you, we were celebrating because this is great news for our military and great news for our nation. And we commend the Department of Defense for taking this much needed step.
Mike, I know this is personal to you as you served for 7 years on active duty as an attorney with the U.S. Marine Corps, and you continue to proudly serve our nation as a member of the Corps Reserve. Talk for a moment about the importance of faith and the ability to practice one's faith for those who serve. I know you mentioned it briefly before.
Yeah, you know, I was on active duty for about 7 years, or actually almost 8 years. And during my time, I had the opportunity to deploy to Afghanistan. And when we were in Afghanistan, we took enemy fire. And when you look into the eyes of your fellow Marines, or, you know, if you're in a different branch of the service, your fellow soldiers, sailors, and airmen, and you see that there's real fear. because this is a life and death situation and you're confronted with your own mortality, that's when faith becomes real. And you begin to realize that many of us are there serving because we believe in something much larger than ourselves. And we want to know and have the comfort to know that if something were to happen to us, that our faith will be there to sustain us. And to take that away from our troops, I can't think of anything more damaging to our military. But on the flip side, to ensure that religious freedom remains strong and robust in our military, there are very few things we can do to make our military more capable and stronger. And that's why I continue to say that religious freedom truly is a national security issue, because I experienced it firsthand, and I know that there are many thousands of my fellow service members who would agree with me.
Well, Mike, we don't have much time, but any final thoughts?
Well, we commend the Commander-in-Chief, we commend the Department of Defense for continuing to look for opportunities to defend religious freedom. And this latest step of issuing revised guidance to become in step and in sync with the Constitution, it's not a moment too soon, but the work's not done. We still have a lot of work to do to continue to fight for religious freedom. The price for freedom is eternal vigilance, and First Liberty Institute will remain eternally vigilant for that.
Mike, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your service to our country. Mike Berry, General Counsel for First Liberty Institute. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, a report from England on the 400th anniversary of the sailing of the Mayflower. Today marks the 400th anniversary of the departure of the Mayflower, the ship that carried a group of settlers to a new life across the Atlantic Ocean. Dignitaries from the UK, the Netherlands, and the U.S. gathered in Plymouth to mark the occasion, including the launch of a new Mayflower. Unlike its wooden predecessor, the vessel is a sleek, high-tech trimaran powered by the sun and steered by artificial intelligence. Its creators hope it will spawn a new generation of high-tech research vessels. London-based journalist Amy Gutman joins me now from Plymouth with a look at today's ceremonies. Amy, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. Give us a sense of what the day has been like there today. And also, can you talk about the coronavirus pandemic and how it's impacted today's events?
Tracy, today's events were much more subdued than organizers originally envisioned. There were meant to be 30,000 people lining the seafront where I'm standing, with a choir of 1,000 voices. Instead, there were a few hundred people along this coastal path and a handful of dignitaries. Bear in mind that just on Monday, we had a new government policy restricting the number of people who could gather to only 6. So this has really wreaked havoc with organizers' plans, so much so that the publicity has been almost non-existent, to the point where we had locals stopping to ask us what was going on. They had no idea about the timing of events or what was happening. Fortunately, organizers have pushed events into next year, and there are already plans to recreate this event as they originally intended next July, actually July 11th, so just a week after Independence Day.
That's pretty exciting. I know today's event for the first time included the Wampanoag Nation, which is pretty significant. Can you give us a brief background on them as a people and also the role they played in the Pilgrim survival?
Of course, it's important to note that the reason why it's so significant is two. One is the role that they played with the Pilgrim's survival, which I'll get to in one second. But the other really important part here is the fact that previously they had never been invited to participate in these kinds of commemorations without conditions being applied by organizers. And those conditions were that the Wampanoag whitewash or gloss over, if you will, some of the difficult history about the relationship between the Wampanoag and the Pilgrims that ultimately led to conflict between the two, and also led to the demise of largely of the Wampanoag. And so this is really significant for the Wampanoag in that it's all about inclusivity and honesty and transparency, which of course really is representative of the time. Now, the importance of the Wampanoag in being a part of these commemorations is the role that they played. So they had lived in New England, and particularly in this part of area around Plymouth, for hundreds of years before the Pilgrims arrived. The Pilgrims arrived, unfortunately, totally unprepared for the conditions. Somehow they were under the mistaken belief that because New England is geographically south of the Netherlands and south of southern England, they somehow thought that this meant that New England would be quite a moderate temperate climate. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. So they arrived in Plymouth just 6 weeks before the dead of winter with no food, no supplies, and no idea how to survive in this very difficult winter climate. And the Wampanoag really helped them to learn how to farm, learn how to cultivate, and really provide for themselves in these conditions.
Amy, so much we could talk about, but unfortunately we're running out of time, so I just have to thank you right now. What an exciting day. Amy Gutman, London-based journalist, thank you again.
Thank you.
We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.